knowing that you're going to fail no matter what you do is the first step. Here are the ways that everything can go wrong. We think about this nonstop because it costs us money. It keeps us up at night. That's the reason why I'm only 17 and I look this bad, because I'm so worried about this phenomenon.
You need to grow up.
Grow up? I'm 38 years old.
On this episode of AV Week, Windows moves to the cloud. We break down the numbers of InfoComm 2023 and backups and redundancies for critical systems. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 619, recorded Friday, June 30th, 2023. Broken enough. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. We are back, tanned and rested from InfoComm 2023, but it's only 2 weeks out, so yeah, of course we're going to talk about it. First and foremost, people we have to talk about the news and information we've got this week. Kate Adkins from Root Integration, who I got to meet in real life at InfoComm. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Also with us is an old friend. He's not old. I've just known him for a long time. Mr. Mike Brandis from Q-SYS.
Hey, Tim. Good to be on. I'm less than a year from my last one.
Jeez, you stop it. Is it really?
It's 7 months. It's a record for me.
That may be a record. Mitchell will have to fix that. I say that as it's his fault. It's totally mine. Also with us is David Title. David is from Bravo Media. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I mentioned InfoComm. We really are 2 weeks out from that, which it feels like it was yesterday, as well as feeling like it was, 6 months ago. So first and foremost, our first story is going to be InfoComm. Trade show attendance came out basically Friday evening, maybe Saturday of the show itself. They had 29,000 verified attendees. Very quickly, a side note on that. I've had issues with AVIXA in the past. Obviously we don't all agree on the same thing at the same time, and we don't see eye to eye 100%. I have to give them credit for doing this verified attendees the last couple of years. It's a push that they're doing. It is saying that this is how many people came to the show floor that were interested in the products, in the vendors, right? So 36,000 is what NAB would have said, right? Because that's the number of actual badges. InfoComm and AVIXA has made a point of saying this is the verified. These are the people who are actual attendees, minus people like Brandis and me, who had exhibitor badges, right? So we don't count, Mike, is what I'm saying. So 29,000 verified attendees, significant jump from last year. We'll get to that in a second. 700 exhibitors, 156 AV professionals obtained their CTS that week. Show attracted a diverse range of industry professionals. 20% were international. First-time attendees made up 37%, which I think is a huge number, and over 20% were end users. In 2022, Las Vegas, show had 19,000 verified attendees, so pretty significant jump year over year. Mr. Brandis, you and I both had booths, which means that we saw our square and no more. But from a numbers standpoint and from an industry standpoint, what does this jump to darn near 30,000 verified attendees tell us?
Well, I can tell you we were so busy that I wasn't even allowed in my booth. I'd be taking up too much space. So that's a good problem to have. I think it says that people are back and ready for live events, but I think anyone who was given that question would probably say the same thing. Just doing some quick math here, I think we are up 10,000, so roughly 50% increase over last year in Vegas. Orlando's usually better attended anyways, but I think it's, to compare it to pre-pandemic numbers, I think it's a little bit too premature, but I think it's good. It's exciting. And unlike other shows, I felt like there was a real energy on the floor. There was a real energy in the lobbies. There was a real energy in all the different events that I attended. So people were excited to get back in front of other people, excited to conduct business with humans instead of portions of their screen. So it's really exciting to kind of be back and just kind of ride that And the best part was there was no room for me in the booth, so I got to talk to people most of the time. My favorite thing to do.
I have to admit, I did not spend a whole lot of time in our booth as well. I was doing my day job, so running around and talking to the marketing people from Q-SYS as well. Kate, integrator, walking the show floor, but also obviously, networking and stuff. What did we learn the week of InfoComm? Not just about obviously the gizmos and gadgets and the newfangled this, that, and the other, but also about the industry.
For me, this is my first InfoComm, so I don't really have a whole lot that I can compare it to. But just based off of what I was seeing, I was really seeing, it kind of confirmed for me what I've been feeling lately, is that there's this divide that's happening in the industry between like the experiential stuff and like the conferencing is like the really simplified, almost kind of commoditized stuff, right? So there were a ton of sound bars that I saw on the show floor. And then you had, at the other end of that, you had the giant, impressive, transparent OLED walls and all that kind of stuff. But it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot that was like really in the middle, which was really interesting for me to see that kind of like split. And I'm also wondering if maybe part of the attendance increase is because it seemed like there was a lot more end user focus than what I was maybe expecting, which was really interesting too. I know HETMA had a booth there, and there was a lot of people there from the higher ed space that I got to talk to in the education sessions and stuff like that. So it was very interesting. It was definitely an interesting thing for me to see as my first time at InfoComm.
Yeah, it was. You're one of those 36% that it was your first time. 100% agree on the end user focused. Avixa made a point of saying that a number of times over the last 6 months in various articles. David, from your perspective and where you sit in the industry, what did we see? I mean, Kate mentioned my favorite thing on the show floor, which is the transparent OLED. Just because I love OLED and just because I love that specific product from LG, the installation and the demonstration they did was akin to taking several. No, this is what they did. They took several transparent OLEDs next to each other, almost like a storefront window, right? That was kind of the experience there, and then put the content on it. And obviously, the content they created and they had different varying levels of opacity, so they could demonstrate the fact that, hey, this really is a piece of glass that you can see through, and have this experience for your clients, and obviously that very, very much leans into retail. But from your standpoint, and what sort of canvases did you see?
Well, I think it was interesting. I was there both to check stuff out, see people I hadn't seen since before the pandemic, which becomes a longer and longer time. But also, I was speaking as well on a panel about immersive experiences and which had quite a lot of folks from that end user category attending as well. And I think a lot of what drove attendance and some of the energy there in general is how much broader the environment is for AV integration across environments. So part of how Bravo got so involved in this world, from coming out of more of a animation and event background, is that spaces from retail to hospitality to hospitals to commercial spaces, corporate spaces, everyone is beginning to see the opportunity, and the technology is now there to support enhancing these environments in dynamic ways. And obviously, the foundation of that is the hardware and the systems that are going to run it. And so I definitely felt there were people coming from a lot of different angles and a lot of different use cases and desires walking around at InfoComm than 5 years ago, which is probably the last time I was in attendance in Orlando.
I will give some props out to a friend, Mark Coxon, who now works for AVSPL's Experiential Design Group. Their booth and their display, their demonstration was phenomenal, right? And back to Kate's point for a second about it being, on one end very much experiential. That's what SPL did, especially the design group. Coxon was there, Julian was there, a number of their principals in the design group were there, showing off some of that experiential magic, as it were. So yeah, absolutely.
One of the, obviously part of, again, back to the energy and the feeling on the floor, part of that is, if you're trying to stand out on that floor, it's become more of a challenge, and the booths themselves need to be more experiential, regardless of the product. In many cases. And honestly, your LED display is only going to look as good as the content that's on it and the experience that's being created around it. And so I think there was more energy being put into that across the board, and many fewer booths and displays that were just, a poster and a table. That's for sure.
On that topic, I think, it's amazing to see the transformation in our industry from the, folding accordion magazine catalog days when I started going to InfoComm, which was not that long ago, in the grand history of InfoComm, to some of the stuff we saw on the show floor today. We saw a lot of, booths that had gigantic LED screens. That's easy to draw the eye to. Virtual broadcast studios, DOOH advertising, you name it. That's easy. But some of these other, ones that aren't so easy, you see a lot of products stacked up next to each other. You see a lot of labels. You see a lot of cut sheets, and there's someone standing next to a table almost like, hey, is there something you want to buy from my stall here at the cool AV flea market that we're all attending? So it's kind of really nice as I was able to kind of venture through the show floor. Those that did it really well didn't necessarily show their product or talk about their product. There was a lot of stations where maybe their product was in use. There was a lot of miniature applications or vignettes set up to tell people how they might experience their product in the wild. Our booth was kind of a Disney ride where you went through a few different stations and then you exited through the gift shop. And that was really cool. But it kind of reminds me of some other things that you've seen throughout, the history. I think Harman did it a few years ago with their kind of no product, no technology, just experiences, and kind of getting back to that. Ultimately, system integrators buy products to fulfill customer experiences, and that's really important. But as a focus on end customers emerges, right? I think we said 20% of the total population of the show was end users, 36% first-time attendees, right? Were those the numbers? Yeah. I think I roughly have them right. It's a good time in our industry for people's first experiences and end users' experiences to be how the technology accomplishes a problem, not what speeds and feeds do you have and what color black is your black box this year.
Yeah, I mean, and that was something that I was really looking forward to as my first time going, is what I wanted to see on the floor. Was I wanted to see how can I use these products and give me examples, kind of give me that inspiration. One of the things that I saw, and it was, maybe something that I would never really use in my day-to-day job because we just don't do this, but I think Epson had a little projector that was shooting down on the floor and it was directing you through the booth. And I'm like, things like that, just that little thing, it just gives me a thought that I never had before, and just a different way to use your project, a different way to see your product too.
All right, our next story comes to us from our friends over at AV Magazine. A catastrophic failure of a control room transceiver resulted in the complete shutdown of the Dutch rail system. Reminds me back to our days at ISE, Mike. Causing widespread disruption, the incident exposed the vulnerability of critical infrastructure to technical glitches and raised concern about the robustness of control systems. The transceiver malfunctioned, leading to the loss of communications between the control rooms and the trains, bringing the entire rail network to a standstill. Thousands of passengers were stranded, and delays rippled across the country's transportation network. The incident serves as a stark reminder of the importance of maintaining and fortifying essential infrastructure to prevent such catastrophic failures from occurring in the future. If you have ever been to Amsterdam or if you've been to ISE prior to being in Barcelona, you understand the use case and the ubiquitousness of those trains, whether that's the metro or the trains that go, city to city. Kate, I'm going to start with you on this. Kate's an incredible programmer. This is 100% in my brain a control and automation story. One of the things that the article points out is the reminder that backups and redundancies are important. Okay, start with that. Not to be silly, but redundancy means buying multiple pieces of the same gear.
Yep.
how do you get clients to understand that and quite literally buy into the idea of having redundant systems?
Yeah, I mean, when I first read this article, the first thing that came to my mind was that IT team had a terrible day, right? And I think it's just something that when you're talking to customers about it, you got to consider how critical is this function? Like how bad of a day are you going to have if this whole thing just, falls down? You might be able to get way in, maybe a basic room or something like that. If that's down for a day, you can move a meeting or whatever. But if you have something that's running your whole head end, your whole environment, if it's a really critical function, if it's in, like a knock or something like that, you got to have that redundancy there because, electronics are electronics. Electricity does funny things sometimes, sometimes things fail and nobody can predict it. You got to have that stuff on hand to be able to swap, preferably to be able to automatically roll over and keep you going without any like real downtime. But the other thing that I saw in this article too that I thought was really interesting was the one quote that usually you get a notification if it breaks, then you know where the problem is, but this wasn't broken enough. And I think that was also a very interesting quote in there. And I think it goes to, it's not enough just to have the backups and the redundancies, but you also need to have ways to know what exactly the problem is. I mean, it took them, 15 hours to find that it was this one little broken piece. I mean, why did it take 15 hours? They clearly didn't have the right notifications. They didn't have enough information from the system to understand what was really happening. And it's really important to get that as both from a programmer side, we need to make that available in our systems, but also, the manufacturers, working with them, giving us, that information and that feedback back so we can act on these things and have useful information to maintain these systems.
All right, David, Kate alluded to this. I tell my team all the time, this is not, nobody's going to die. This is not rocket surgery. There are elements, though, that we put in, things like NOCs, things like, command and control centers, that are incredibly crucial. Train systems, getting people from point A to point B and not stranded in the middle of nowhere. So as you guys are talking about not just the art, but also the infrastructure and keeping those systems up and running, how do you get clients to understand the importance of redundant systems?
It's really complicated. And, again, this goes back to the thing where those end users are really getting so widespread. One of the interesting things that we've been trying to figure out and solve for instance, in the retail spaces, you can kind of get away with doing a very cool and, intensive experience within a flagship space. But then if there's a desire to take some element of that and roll that into 500 doors across America, the support systems that exist for that within that industry are very limited versus, let's say, you're doing a corporate rollout of, 500 conference rooms. They're going to have an IT department of some kind. They may not be able to deal with everything, but there's some internal support there. So a lot of it is figuring out kind of who's involved from that end user side and who needs to get involved to support that. And we've been doing a lot of outreach to integrators, to folks on the installation side, on the service side, to really understand how we can best engage them when we have clients that are looking to expand or improve on their overall digital environment. What does that really require? How do we get that to them so that they do have the right mix? And, I don't really think we have a client that I'm not going to name in the retail space with, not huge, let's say 10 doors across the US and Canada. And the last time we did a content update for them, we mailed thumb drives to each location. So, it's more than baby steps for a lot of these places to go from wherever they are to being in a place where they can actually get the value out of the hardware they have in that place, because the system that runs it, how it runs, who keeps it running, is everything between whether or not you're getting any value out of that final display or whatever it is that's showing out to the world.
It's what we used to call sneaker net, David. Run it from one place to another. Brandis, from a manufacturing standpoint, Kate mentioned the fact that they didn't know for 15 hours where this one piece was broken. What can manufacturers do to not only, put things into place into their systems and their hardware and software, but also educate integrators to educate the end user?
Yeah, before we get there, I do want to point out a few things. They had a failover network set up somewhere else. They were able to move things along. This is not a fly by the seat of your pants, do it yourself install, and it still experienced failure. So all systems are subject to failure, first of all, whether or not we're talking about AV systems, in this case, train automation systems. Think about databases being corrupted, causing flight delays, yada, 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 on people's old school. Redundancy and resiliency is really just an intent that needs to be made by the end user in many cases. It's sometimes the first thing that gets tossed off the table when it comes time to value engineer. And the intent that they're saying is it's better to be affordable than reliable in many cases. Swapping out subpower components, like the gentleman in the article alluded to there, of course, with inexpensive transceiver modules, creating a really expensive problem. It's a joke saying, but one that's pretty common, is it costs a lot of money to save money. And, this is a great example of it. I don't know what the component differential of this piece could be, but I'm sure it is not equal to 15 hours of delays and people's times troubleshooting and 750 canceled trains and passengers overnight. And the list goes on and on and on. Yeah. So that let's sub $180 component cost out created tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars of downstream impacts. And no one ever thinks about that. So resiliency and reliability are definitely an intent that need to be brought to the table by the end user. On the manufacturing side of things, I think it's about providing, as many opportunities for those type of things to be brought into discussions, whether it's having multiple paths to the same product from a network standpoint, multiple fail-safes within a product. I mean, as everything turns into more software driven, it's less about, the electrical voltage tripping this transistor and, your Rube Goldberg of electricity within a product. It's more about, having watchdog timers and things like that someone like Kate could speak way more knowledgeably about than I can. But knowing that you're going to fail no matter what you do is the first step. Resolving your failures, as many of them as you can find, is your next step. And I think that's kind of what your manufacturing partners, your technology providing partners, and even your system integrators can bring to your end customers. Here are the ways that everything can go wrong. We think about this nonstop because it costs us money. It keeps us up at night. That's the reason why I'm only 17 and I look this bad, because I'm so worried about this phenomenon. So how do we eliminate those issues for our customers and for our customers' customers?
You look really good for 17, I'm just saying. All right, last story. Microsoft plans to bring Windows 11 to the cloud, making it accessible to users worldwide. This move aims to revolutionize the user experience by offering cloud-based access to the popular operating system. Users would be able to access Windows 11 from any device, eliminating the need for specific hardware requirements or expensive upgrades. Microsoft's vision for cloud-based Windows 11 reflects their commitment to inclusivity and adaptability in the digital landscape, potentially opening up new possibilities for users globally. Nothing in the article about Update Tuesday, though. I didn't see that. So, David, first question here. What are the dangers of moving AV and content and all the things into the cloud?
That it all goes away like a poof. I think that's the big danger.
Right?
Yeah. Look, I was thinking, cause I got a little bit of fresh air once or twice when I was young. So might come across a little younger than I am, but I remember when we had terminal computers, and you basically we didn't call it the cloud and it wasn't quite as fancy, but you had this sort of dumb thing at the end.
It was a mainframe. It was a big ass computer somewhere in the building.
Yeah, but your computer wasn't. You didn't have your own computer.
No. Actually, it was a dummy.
Yeah, and so I think at the end of the day, to deliver the kind of experiences that we all are going to want to deliver through these different displays and integrations, you're not going to be able to do this locally. It's not going to be a thing. And so to some degree, this is moving to the cloud, and whose cloud, what happens when the cloud goes away and you turn on your machine and there's nothing there. I worry, I think about that with, everybody on Gmail, or your bank. But anyway, but I do think that, to some degree, there's some thought to be given to what is your fallback.
Yeah.
How important is, if you do lose everything, if your screens go dead or your displays go dead or your communication goes dead, how important is that? And then, what's the minimum solution? What's your minimum solution that you can have in place as a worst case scenario?
Yeah. All right, Brandis, what are the benefits of taking everything to the cloud?
It's really funny we're having this conversation right after talking about redundancy and resilience.
I thought so.
Look at you planning this out.
I do think smart every once in a while, dude.
I love it. Yeah, it's great until it's not great. And, as the saying goes, there's no cloud. It's just somebody else's computer, right? Whether it was the terminal to the mainframe days or whether it was the wonderful world of thin clients and edge computing in the 2013 to 2017 realm. And now this is just another flavor of the same cake here, where the mainframe is now in someone else's computer somewhere across the world, and you're accessing it with whatever thin client device you're already holding, your iPhone, your Android phone. I don't know. There's not enough information here to really understand what's going on, but the benefits are great. You don't need a separate computer to do X, Y, and Z. I use a Mac computer and I have a virtual machine of Windows embedded on my computer. But there's plenty of times where all I want to do is just move 2 blocks in Visio and I don't want to run back into my office to get the Mac computer. I've got a phone. I've got, an iPad. There's many ways I can get to a web browser or any other application. And it just makes it a little bit easier. When we talk long arc about our industry, the global technology industry, I won't limit it to just AV. We generate a lot of pollution. We generate a lot of landfill items. We generate a lot of hazardous materials just so that way we can have a unique device that does this and a unique device that does that. So I'm sure this first implementation is not going to be a home run. They rarely are. But what I will say is I love the intention of let's not have purpose-built devices where we can avoid them. Let's combine as much functionality into devices as possible. I mean, none of us are carrying around a separate digital camera, tape player. Maybe, Tim, you are, Atlas, flashlight, magnifying lens, right? We use a phone for all that. And that's an example that's kind of become exhaustive over time, but it's a good point, and that it's all transitioning towards fewer things, which I think in general is important as we talk about the just sheer amount of crap that we've generated that sits in landfills and processing centers and things like that. Because every 2 weeks you need a new phone to run the latest iOS, or every 4 years you can no longer use Windows on a device that doesn't have like supercomputer components in it. So I'm sure there's going to be a performance trade-off like there always is, right? Like, okay, I can't do, I don't know, Bitcoin mining on my iPhone, running in a virtual container or whatever people do. But for the vast majority of people, it really represents a trashless opportunity to use Windows, which is pretty cool.
The one thing I would say, and the thing that we surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, continue to run into a lot is in terms of that ground level infrastructure for carrying data and network is almost never there to do the things they'd like to be able to do via cloud, and so I think looking at what what are you delivering just in terms of bandwidth and network access, you need a big pipe to do all this stuff. And a lot of places aren't doing that, and so are having to almost go back in after the fact when they realize, oh, we thought this thing could, we thought we'd be able to do all this stuff, but it turns out that, the break point's much earlier down in the chain.
Yeah. And one of the things, and this is not a political statement, so don't send me mail on this, the government in the U.S. is doing some infrastructure updating to rural areas. Right now, this is where I play the big dumb American. Other parts of the world, they got us beat when it comes to speeds on infrastructure. Right, in certain parts. Right, you start moving out into the rural areas of Wyoming. Right, or even here. I mean, I live in St. Louis. There are parts of Missouri and parts of Illinois that do not have high-speed access. Yes, they're rural. Yes, you're talking about farmland and woods, but those people still need, they still need Windows 11. They still need access to things. And so the government is doing something that's similar to what they did in the 70s when they rolled out cable access to places where, according to the businesses, it was not financially viable. So that'll at least, offset some of that.
I think it's great to think about that again in terms of a progression. Like, we're not waiting till every piece of the puzzle gets solved to do something about it. There's a lot of these, big ticket things that need to get going or need to be done, if we can be honest, a while ago, that we've often thought of, well, there's this edge case, there's that. And yes, people in certain places can't access it. But having the intention to solve for those problems over a period of time, I think really creates a wonderful opportunity moving forward, because that's going to enable this. That will be an enabling technology for this, which will be an enabling technology for the reduction in consumption, which will mean less trash, which will mean fewer, big gigantic trash heaps, which is the only way you get to play elevated golf in Florida, by the way, is when they build a golf course on top of an old trash heap. So pulling that back around to InfoComm in Orlando, and that's all I got to say.
All right, Kate, you'll last word on this. What are the pros? What are the cons? What do you think about moving AV to the cloud?
I think there's several different things to consider. I think we're already moving that way. I mean, if you think about a lot of places, we have a control system. You have one that's kind of like the brains, and that lives in maybe a head end somewhere and is running, maybe 50 rooms, right? You can run all sorts of rooms off of it. So it's not that much of a leap from that model to doing something cloud-based. I think it does depend on what we're talking about we're putting in the cloud. I think, definitely situations where you need low latency and you need, maybe a security concerns, like that stuff's not going to go to the cloud probably. That stuff's going to be all local still. But something like your control system, that could very easily move into a cloud-based format. And I think there's definitely different things to think about there too, is in terms of, the monetary, way that things work. It's, if you're moving to the cloud, maybe you're moving to a subscription model, right? So you're, instead of having, this is my capital expense, I'm going to put in this conference room, I'm going to pay, X amount of dollars for this one-time purchase, maybe that's a recurring thing. And now you're subscribing to that conference room thing, right? And if somebody stops paying their bills, just like Teams, if you stop paying for that Teams license, it doesn't work anymore.
Kate, I was with you up until then. And I say that as the guy who runs marketing at CTI. I freaking hate my monthly bill to Adobe Creative Cloud. And I do because I'm old enough to remember when I bought freaking, Premiere 1.0 for however many, $50 or whatever.
How many floppy disks did that come on?
They were big floppy disks, 100%. And I held on to it until I wanted the upgrade, right? And then I purchased the new one, right? And you're right. You are absolutely right. And every commercial integrator and Rave and other smart people have written about how the AV industry needs to move to AV as a service. But as one of the folks who pays for the freaking crap it pisses me off.
Yeah, but I mean, the rest of the world is there. I mean, every TV channel you want to watch these days is a subscription service, right? I mean, there's what BMW is making, heated seats a subscription. So, I mean, that's the way.
$5 a month, cancel anytime. It's the greatest business proposal in the history of the world.
And I mean, and it changes the way that clients might be budgeting too, right? Because now it's not, this big one-time expense. It's just an ongoing operating cost. So it changes things there too. That dynamic changes a little bit. But then I think it also puts more of a duty on, integrators like us, if we're going to move in that kind of manner, to actually continue updating and evolving systems the same way the rest of the software world works. And it can't just be like we put it in and we walk away and we never touch it again. There has to be that continuing added value throughout the lifetime of that subscription. to keep people paying for it. Otherwise, they're just going to drop it like they drop Netflix.
All right. That'll be a good place to stop. Mr. Brandis, thank you, sir. Good to see you. I'll have you back on in 3 years.
Look forward to it.
How do people get a hold of you or Q-SYS?
You can find Q-SYS online at Q-SYS.com, Q-SYS.com. I am not online. I'm on LinkedIn. So if you're looking to hang out and see what post I like, you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right, very good. Kate, very nice to have you on this program. Like I said, she's been on Steve's program a couple times, and I got to meet her in real life at InfoComm. So how do people connect with you or Root Integration?
You can go to our website, rootintegration.com. Email me, kate@rootintegration.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter. You could find me there just about every Sunday for AV in the AM. My handle is code_Kate. And I also have a YouTube series that I just started called User Friendly AV. So if you're a programmer and you want to learn some more about UX and UI design, I've been kind of putting together some stuff for that. So you can check that out too.
Very cool. David, nice to have you here. How do people get a hold of you or Bravo Media?
Yeah, great to be with everyone today. You can find us at bravomedia.com, and I'm a pretty heavy LinkedIn user and like to check stuff out and post some stuff and connect with folks there. And you can also throw me an email at david@bravomedia.com, and I gave up on Twitter.
For me, for Tim Albright, do not follow me on the Twitters or LinkedIn or anywhere else, but go by our website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. I mentioned State of Control that Kate's been on a couple of times. That's Steve Greenblatt's show. Women in AV, check out Jennifer Goodyear and Erica Carroll. Also EdTech and XR Star. And according to Mitchell, they recorded an episode of Architect this week. So that's exciting. My buddy Brian Hardgurken, who works with architects and the AIA, is bringing that back. And he's starting to interview some architects on how the architecture and the AV can work together. So I'm very excited about that coming down the pipeline. So travel and other shows coming up. We just mentioned InfoComm, CEDIA Expo is coming down the pipeline, as well as CI Expo. So I will be there the 13th, I think, of... no. Sorry, my notes are early. 7th of September, 7th to the 9th of September in Denver. And then I will be at UCX USA the 13th through the 14th of September in Austin. Apparently, I'm not going to be home at all in September. Lastly, I meant to mention this at the beginning. If you're watching the video, if you're not watching the video, you can stop listening now because I'm going to talk about video. Behind me is a big blue square. Mitchell, my fantastic editor and producer, came up with the idea of, hey, we should put a video wall behind you. So that's what that is. It's the outline for our video wall. It should be up either next week or week after next. So I'm kind of excited about it because it's cold in here and, the heat and everything else. It's a bad joke. So check that out. So all that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.